And a happy Wednesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Not too much going on weather-wise besides a steady warming trend as we go into the weekend. And I think that's going to be a very welcome sight and a very welcome feeling after the cold snap we've had at the beginning of this work week. So we'll go ahead and talk about some specific numbers, giving you an idea about just how cold it was over the last couple of days. And something cool that did happen in the nighttime hours yesterday that kind of got drowned out of focus because obviously all of our attention was on the very cold weather that did take place. So we'll go over all of that to start your extended forecast here at 11 a.m. So if we can get the graphics to advance, might just take 1 second for the clicker to get going and get on the same page as myself. We are talking about this first fall freeze that we had specifically on Tuesday morning, but how about the record? So this is getting into some of the higher, or in this specific case, the lower extremity of some of the temperatures that we've seen. On Monday, we got off to a very cold start. It was breezy, it was windy. We had feels like temperatures well below what the actual numbers were to kickstart the morning. Didn't necessarily get into any criteria in terms of the low temperature until we got into the nighttime hours. But first things first, let's talk about Monday afternoon. 49 degrees was the lowest high temperature that we have recorded on Monday all time. That happened back in 1913. Keep that year in mind because we will circle back to it as we propel into Tuesday. But we recorded a high temperature here in Macon of 50 degrees. So yes, this is 1 degree above that official record lowest high. However, our wind chill was through the roof. We had a wind advisory in place. It made wind chills go down into the low 40s and the upper 30s throughout the warmest portion of your Monday afternoon. So that high temperature itself doesn't really tell the full story about what was going on with our forecast, but still it says something that the actual temperature was right there around what the record lowest high was all time. And your record low, 29 degrees, that had been set back 2 times before this year, back in 1923 and 1967. Well, we did match that morning low temperature, but that's typically when the low temperature did occur during the early morning hours, right there around sunrise. Our temperatures around sunrise were somewhere in the upper 30s, believe it or not. What we recorded of 29 degrees, of course, does match that record, but we actually hit that in the nighttime hours on Monday, going into early on Tuesday morning. Give you an idea about how quick we cooled down, and we already started to get that first freeze as we went into the evening hours on Monday. So then we'll go over to Tuesday, where finally we did claim a new record. Your record low temperature sat at 26 degrees. Once again, back in 1913, that very cold year on record, we recorded a low of 25 degrees. And I do imagine that number would have cooled down even more if we didn't have as much of a breeze present that was present during the morning hours on Tuesday, because we had feels like numbers. Maybe you were recording a value of 25. Feels like numbers as low as 17 and 18 degrees across some locations in central Georgia. So definitely well below freezing criteria, and something that the only time I've seen it in about my little over 2 years of forecasting was when we had that snow at the very beginning of this past year. We actually had feels like numbers down in the single digits the morning after we got some snow. So definitely not getting into that territory, but it does say something that we're kind of on the cusp of some numbers like that. And we haven't even hit the start of the winter season. We haven't even hit December yet. So on average, we've been talking about it over the last couple of days. The average date of our first freeze does happen on November 11th. And technically, if you're going when we finally dip below 32 degrees or match that 32 degree mark, it was technically on November 10th, but it was in the very later portion of the day as we got past sunset. But we were really right on cue with average of November 11th for seeing that first freeze. The earliest we've ever done it is October 14th. That was back in 1988. So imagine a month prior to now, we started to get some freezing temperatures in central Georgia. That is way, way too early. And then the latest time we've hit that first freeze mark, December 26th back in 1918. Looks like it was a pretty warm start to the winter season as we were way back over 100 years ago. But this is just the first freeze date. Remember, 32 degrees, we saw numbers well below that, as much as 7 degrees below that with wind chills in the upper teens. It's not very characteristic of us to go this much below freezing as we do start to get that first freeze date. Typically, you're right there around 32 degrees. And that first day that you do hit 32 degrees, of course, does claim your first freeze. So an uncharacteristically cool spell to start the work week, and like I mentioned, that is going to get warmer. But this did get overshadowed by all of the talk of the colder temperatures. We got a great image of the northern lights as we went into the evening and nighttime hours last night. Take a look at some of these photos I grabbed from the Weather Network and that were sent in to me. Bonnie Sue Johnson caught this image of that kind of pink and reddish hue. This quality picture isn't the best as what I grabbed on my desktop, but this was up here in the Macon area. And then we'll go down to Byron, where this is a spectacular image. You're actually getting a good glimpse of the entire night sky off in the distance as you are farther away from the tree line. This was taken by Linda Fishman Joyner down in Byron. So Peach County got a good glimpse of those northern lights. And one that was sent into my email, Paula Huffmaster over in Musella caught this image of kind of that pink glowy image just above the tree line. Typically, a lot of these images are taken when you increase the exposure on your cameras. You utilize that night mode. Some of these images may not have necessarily been visible to the naked eye. And like I said, it did get overshadowed by the colder temperatures. So many of you are probably wondering, hey, are we going to have this viewable once again as we go into the nighttime hours? Well, two things need to happen. Number one, we need to have some form of a solar storm very similar to what we did see during the overnight hours last night. One of those CMEs, if you remember back in July when we were talking about this, those coronal mass ejections. So when you kind of get some of those solar storms that propel some of that solar radiation into our atmosphere, that is what causes the display of some spectacular colors, even down this far south. But we also have to have a clear sky night, and we definitely had that last night. Take a look at the high quality image from this camera where you can see plenty of stars that are also illuminating the night sky with some of those spectacular colors. So I don't know much about space weather. I'll go ahead and be upfront and honest. It is a very volatile thing. It changes a lot more frequently than, say, the weather does in our immediate atmosphere that we study. So what is happening right now? A G3 storm. This is as the latest discussion from the Space Weather Prediction Center. So a G3 storm, that's getting into about the halfway range of some of these solar storms that get emitted. You can see kind of right here, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and then right there, even close to a 5 category. So 3 is kind of right in the middle. It's about a 1 through 5 scale. G3, of course, not necessarily normally the strongest solar storm that we can see. The G4 storm was actually what was visible last night, and that's why we got a good image of some of those beautiful lights that down this far south. So we are currently at G3 levels, but we did hit those G4 levels earlier, and that's back in the overnight hours of last night. So what do we expect to happen from here? The nature of the current disturbance means that G4 conditions with the chance for even higher levels are still possible. The threat is expected to remain throughout the day today, as another disturbance is expected to arrive around midday on the 12th. Well, we're almost at midday on the 12th. Obviously, it's sunny outside, so we're not going to see any of those beautiful lights on display during prime daytime hours. But the possible impacts, you can see infrastructure operators, a lot of things that operate off electromagnetic radiation are going to have a lot more drastic impacts than just normal people working 9 to 5, just going about your daily routine. The main impact that we can see is the aurora was visible over most of the country as of last night. And I did tell you that we are expecting another disturbance as we arrive around midday today. We actually have the possibility of one more disturbance after that, a third CME, as we go sometime over the next couple of days. We have the possibility of maybe seeing some form of the northern lights as we go all the way into the 14th of November. That is going to be on Friday evening. So it's really just going to depend on the timing, if the skies are clear, and of course the magnitude of some of those solar storms. We need storms of at least that G4 category or even getting greater over the foreseeable future. So we'll talk about what the skies are looking like. Right now, it's anything but set in stone if we are going to see this. Like I mentioned, the possibility is there for another image of the northern lights tonight. I would just say if you want to have a chance of seeing them, go outside right before you plan on heading to bed. Make sure you're bundling up because temperatures will be cooler. However, we are going to have some clear skies. So we'll go over what Future View has to say about that in a moment. Warming trends starting today. So now that we got out of this one last cold morning with some numbers that were as low as freezing temperature, even some values that popped in the upper 20s very briefly, we are going to see some warmer afternoons in store, especially compared to the last couple of days. back to the 70s as we head into the weekend, and rain's still hard to find. So it is going to be a dry stretch of weather. Not necessarily the best thing for our drought conditions, but we'll go over when our next best chance of rain is going to be. And I'll give you a bit of a spoiler, not going to happen until sometime as we go into next week. Clear blue skies all over central Georgia. We have a bit of a light breeze that you can see indicated right here by the flags, kind of blowing straight towards the camera. This is facing over to the west at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, indicating that these winds do have a westerly component to them. And looking at your temperatures, boy, is it nice to see some green on this temperature map. Upper 50s in a couple of areas already into the 60s here at 11 a.m. 60 in Gordon, 61 in Warner Robins, another 61 down in Dublin. Everyone else is scattered about 57, 58, or 59 degrees. But we have seen the blue color not be as widespread as it was down here in the southeast United States this time yesterday. 61 for the warmest temperature that we're seeing. That matches the number that is currently in Orlando, way down to the south in Florida. We have a 63, so slightly warmer in Panama City, and it looks like that's the trend as you go westward along the Gulf Coast. 78, the warmest temperature that we can spot over in Houston. And I will note that the temperature over in Houston yesterday at this time was matching the temperature up in Denver, Colorado, who's sitting at, 48 degrees right now. It was a very substantial cool spell that we did have all across the eastern United States, but it looks like we have a ridging pattern, which is going to lead into a warming trend with all of these cool temperatures that you have seen over the last 2 days. Dew point temperatures, they've definitely gotten an increase, but it doesn't really look like it. I mean, there's no color on this dew point temperatures map, and these numbers are still below 40 degrees, even some numbers in the mid to upper 20s like we see down in McRae and Vidalia. But those numbers were in the mid to upper teens yesterday. So we are getting a brief influx of maybe slightly more moisture in your forecast, but overall, it is a story of high pressure continuing to build in, and we have some westerly winds setting in that are blowing all the way back into Mississippi and Alabama. And they are still pretty breezy as we go throughout today. Even some gusts up to 20 miles per hour like what you see in Milledgeville right now, down in Warner Robins in northern Houston County. And we'll talk more about those winds as we head into the afternoon, but it's not influencing what it feels like anymore. That steady and widespread breeze has continued to make the numbers feel a whole lot cooler than what they've actually been sitting at. Now we are feeling pretty true to what the actual temperatures sit at. Feels like 60 in Sandersville, Wrightsville, 61 in Warner Robins, 61 in Dublin. Those were a select few of the locations that have already bumped up to the 60-degree mark. So yesterday's almanac, I did mention that we broke that over 100-year record with the low temperature. 25 is now going to take the cake by the time we roll around to this date on the yesterday's almanac graphic or today's almanac graphic as of this time next year. But 53 degrees was your high temperature. So 17 degrees below average for this time of year. Both of the last 2 days have had high temperatures that were nearly or exactly 20 degrees below your average high of 70 degrees this time of year. So obviously nowhere near this record back in 2020 of 86, and we haven't seen anything in the way of rain. So your departure of rain now down around 1.5 inches above where we should be in the calendar year. That number continues to get lower and lower, and I did allude to the fact we don't really have any rain chances until we get into the middle of next week. So I do imagine that number is going to dip below 1 inch, and we'll start to get flirting with the territory where maybe that positive could flip into a negative over the foreseeable future, but only time will tell with that. It just depends on how much rain we are going to receive from the next rainmaker that drives through. Sunrise now at 7:01. That was yesterday. I imagine it might have gone to 7:02 today. And sunset 5:36 p.m. It still feels way too early, but I am enjoying it getting darker earlier so I can go ahead and hit the hay a little bit earlier so it's darker outside when I fall asleep a little bit earlier than you do to wake up in the middle of the night for that morning show each and every day. So hour by hour, temperatures will make the climb into the mid 60s and the upper 60s throughout that 2, 3, and 4 o'clock window. That's when your temperatures will be at their warmest. Then as we go into around the 5 to 6 p.m. hour, we will see a pretty quick drop off, already back down into the 50s as you roll into the evening hours. Once again, the evenings are still going to be mighty chilly, but they're not going to be as chilly as what we've seen over the past couple of days. I went with a high temperature of 68 degrees, so pretty close to average for this time of year. but we already saw it on the feels like temperature graphic. We have the winds present right now. It's not influencing what the numbers do feel like, and we'll continue to keep those winds present with gusts up to 20 miles per hour throughout this afternoon. But this paired up with some around average high temperatures is going to be a very pleasant fall-like day that is on tap for the rest of your Wednesday. Satellite and radar not even picking up on anything in the way of cloud cover, nothing in the way of rain. That high pressure continues to create a very dry atmosphere here in the southeast, and it's going to be a very uneventful forecast for the state of Georgia over the next couple of days. So let's go into future view. I did mention we got to take a look at what the skies may look like as we go into the nighttime hours tonight. 7 p.m., maybe a couple of higher level clouds, but that's just going to be in a select few locations. Maybe it's building in a little bit more of a blocking and some cloud cover as we go into 9 o'clock. And then if you're still up at the midnight hour, it doesn't look like it's going to be very dense cloud cover. If we do have some present over us in central Georgia, it may limit your visibility just a touch. All in all, I still think it's a good reason to head outside during those nighttime hours just to see if we can get a glimpse of those northern lights. Then let's go all the way into the early morning hours tomorrow. Once again, still trying to pick apart what timing that we could see for maybe that one last CME, that coronal mass ejection. So if you are planning on maybe waking up a little bit earlier to get a glimpse of those northern lights, still looks like a relatively clear environment, but there is more cloud cover back over to the west, so just keep that in mind. There will be some clouds present in the night sky, and if those do kind of interrupt your image of the night sky, it could also lead to a bit of a limitation of the view of anything in the way of northern lights. Now let's transition into tomorrow afternoon. All right, nothing in the way of rain, maybe some clouds building in during the overnight hours into early Friday morning. So say if we are anticipating the northern lights tomorrow night as opposed to tonight, that may be a bit of an issue as we are expecting some more clouds according to future view. But once again, going all the way through the end of your work week, it still looks crystal clear here. Nothing in the way of rain chances, so any of this cloud cover that does pass through is not going to create anything in the way of some precipitation. A dry stretch is definitely what we like to have as we head into the weekend specifically, so you can get your outdoor plans in, but we do definitely need some rain, and we'll talk more about that at the end of this stream. The breeze will continue as we head throughout the afternoon. Once again, the potential for some gusts up to 20 miles per hour. Breeze goes away a little bit as we go into the nighttime hours. Still a bit of one present out of the northwest as we go into tomorrow afternoon, but then the winds really subside as we go all throughout your Friday. Not looking at any of those shades of blue or yellow across central Georgia or across the state of Georgia. So it does look like the winds will steadily subside day by day over the next 3 days. So let's focus on the numbers as we have a very uneventful forecast for your short term in the way of rain chances. 42 for a morning low temperature tomorrow. I never thought we would be saying low 40s is definitely going to be a much warmer start, especially compared to what the values dipped down to yesterday. So we will take what we can get, but this is still chilly. You'll probably need some form of layering as you make your way outside. But be prepared to shed those layers as we go into the afternoon. 72 for a high temperature, mostly sunny skies throughout your Thursday afternoon. It's virtually the same forecast on Friday, except I expect the return of the crystal clear and deep blue skies to return like what we have present currently. 40 degrees for a morning low on Friday. Bit of a downtick between that morning low and in between Thursday morning and all the way into Friday morning. That may be because of that passing front to increase the cloud cover overnight Thursday into early Friday morning. That may result in a little bit of a cool down, starting to give us a bit of a wedge setup where the winds try to funnel some cooler and drier air in from the northeast, but it's not going to have too much of an influence besides maybe a 2-degree decrease in your morning lows between Thursday and Friday. Overall, it's still going to have the morning lows will still have a chill to them as we start out Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, but definitely not feeling anywhere in the neighborhood of what we felt like this morning, what we felt like yesterday morning, and what we felt like Monday morning. Then we see an increase in those morning low temperatures near the 50-degree mark as we go into Sunday. That's indicating that we may get an increase in some cloud cover overnight between Saturday into Sunday, but your afternoon highs just continue to go upward. Low 70s Thursday and Friday turn into mid 70s for your Saturday and Sunday plans. That is running about 6 degrees above average for this time of year of 70 degrees. And obviously I say about, and obviously you may say, Alex, 76 is exactly 6 degrees above your average, but this average number may go down to 69 degrees by the time we get into the end of the weekend. We just continue to see those average highs and average lows decrease, maybe about a degree or two each and every week that we go into this cooler portion of the year. So long range models, do we have any rain in the near future? I did allude to it a little bit earlier in the stream. Some passing cloud cover maybe as we go Saturday night into Sunday, but Saturday afternoon and evening looks good to go. You look clear and rain free for any of those plans. Any weekend plans to round out the weekend on Sunday? Still also looks like a dry forecast, and we continue that trend into Monday before maybe some of the long range models are trying to hint on a rain chance as we go into Tuesday next week. This does have the indications of maybe a frontal boundary trying to form, but we may be in a moisture-starved atmosphere, so we may not have much that pops up in the way of rain ahead of an approaching frontal boundary. But then as we go into Wednesday next week, still not really much model agreement whatsoever. There are plenty of more defined rain chances back over to the west into Louisiana, Mississippi, and all the way over into northeast Texas. But it doesn't look like we have a widespread rainmaker that is on the way over the course of the next week. And we'll go ahead and check in on your tropics outlook. Just to cover the bases, we haven't had activity since Hurricane Melissa, and we still have no activity that is forecasted over the next 7 days. I haven't seen anything with the extended tropical models, some of those climatological models that could hint at a very wide area of development, maybe just hinting at an area down in the Caribbean or the Gulf. But we don't see any signs of any tropical activity whatsoever. Remember, hurricane season will officially go until November 30th, so we still have about another 20 days of the Atlantic hurricane season. Right now, it's looking more and more likely that I think we're done. I think we've already hit our numbers for the 2025 hurricane season, but we'll continue to keep an eye out until we get to that official date. Your 7-day forecast just has a whole lot of sunshine. Steady warming trend as we go into the weekend. The warmest on Saturday and Sunday, but it looks like the above average temperatures are still here to stay as we kick off the work week next week. 74 for a high on Monday, 76 as we go into next Tuesday. And you will see a 20% chance of rain on Tuesday. The long range models had a bit of a better idea of those rain chances on Tuesday, maybe slightly more widespread. However, if we continue to see the trend that there's not much model agreement whatsoever, we'll end up walking off those rain chances. And hopefully we'll have a dry first day of Stuff the Truck, which will kick off next Tuesday. We'll be at the Milledgeville Walmart to start on Tuesday the 18th. On Wednesday, we'll be down at the Dublin Walmart on the 19th. And then on the 20th, we will be at 2 Walmarts. We will be up at one in Macon off Zebulon Road, and we'll be off at the one off Watson Boulevard in Warner Robins. I myself will be live for the midday show there next Thursday. So make sure that you make some plans to help out with a good cause. Make sure that we're giving people some form of some canned goods, some non-perishable goods that they can have on the table for the holiday season. And obviously it's so good to be able to interact with all of you in the community each and every year that we do this fundraiser. Something that we're looking very much forward to. And right now the rain chances aren't looking like they're going to rain on our parade for Stuff the Truck. So we'll continue to keep our fingers crossed that we can walk down that 20% and get the rain chances out of here and just have some very pleasant weather for the midweek next week. So I did say we were going to circle back to the drought conditions at the end of the stream. This is the latest drought monitor. This got released last Thursday. So we still are anticipating another update to this as we go into tomorrow. I would very well imagine that most areas are probably going to see maybe a slight worsening trend with some of these drought conditions, with the exception of maybe our northernmost counties, specifically Jasper, areas of Putnam, maybe Jones, Baldwin, Hancock, and Washington counties, because they did have a stray severe thunderstorm warning that dumped its fair share of rain in those isolated areas over the course of this weekend. So we may actually see some areas of abnormally dry conditions or areas of no color built into those specific counties as we go into tomorrow morning. But most of the rest of central Georgia did not look out with really anything in the way of rain over the past week. So that could cause some of the dry and drought conditions that have settled in to continue to worsen. So we definitely are getting into the time frame where we need some rain, and I'm sure many of you were hoping it lined up with the very cold spell that we had at the beginning of the work week that would have resulted in some frozen precipitation, but no dice on anything in the way of precipitation. We'll see if we can welcome in a more widespread rain chance before we get into the end of the period where we'll get the next update of the drought monitor on next Thursday. But the data as of right now is as of November 4th. That's as of last Tuesday. The data on the update tomorrow will be as of yesterday, so it will be as of November 11th. We'll keep our fingers crossed that we don't see too much worsening with the drought conditions, but we'll also continue to keep you updated about the proper precautions and maybe actions that you need to take in terms of your plants and your crops if they do worsen. And taking a look at your average peak fall foliage. I believe I mentioned this yesterday in the stream. Right now is the time that we are seeing those beautiful colors on all the trees, the yellows, the reds, the oranges. You can go drive around the neighborhood, some of those wooded areas that are in your town, and you are going to see a spectacular display of colors, and we'll continue to have all those very vibrant colors throughout the next week or two here in central Georgia before most of those leaves begin to fall off and die off, and then they start to just crowd your front yard and your backyard. I've noticed that quite a lot with my house, all the neighbors' houses. Their front yards and backyards are absolutely flooded with leaves. So it is a good thing in terms of seeing some really cool colors outside, but a bad thing for all of you that get stuck with some yard work as we go into the Thanksgiving holiday pretty soon. But this is the time that you can get outside and enjoy those gorgeous colors. And once again, you can maybe even pair up some of those gorgeous colors with gorgeous colors in the night sky. So make plans to try to just head outside during the nighttime hours tonight, nighttime hours tomorrow as well, to just see if you can get a peek of anything in the way of those northern lights. We'll keep our fingers crossed that we get one, maybe even 2 more days of some of those beautiful pink and red colors in the night sky that you can get an image of, and welcome you into a weekend that is going to be dry, going to be above average, and a welcome change, especially for all you warm weather lovers and those of you like myself who thought the past 2 days have been way too cold, way too early. That's going to do it for your extended forecast. We'll see you back here once again at 11 a.m. tomorrow for more on your weekend forecast.